Joining me now on News9 Live is a special guest from Israel. We are now joined by Lieutenant Colonel Sarit Zehavi. She's the founder and CEO of Alma Research and Education Center and a security expert in Israel. Thank you so much, Sarit, for joining us on News9 Live. Now, I just want to discuss, for starters, the current situation with you. As per the figures that have been put out, we are given to understand that 900 Israelis have died in these horrific terror attacks so far. Some 2,500 have been wounded. Close to 770 Palestinians, including 140 children, have been killed in the Israeli counterstrikes. 4,000 have been wounded in Gaza. More than 100,000 people have been displaced in Gaza, and the Israeli army says that 1,500 dead bodies of Hamas terrorists have been found in Israeli territory. What is the current situation like? Are there more Hamas terrorists likely still hold up in Israeli cities? The news that we are just hearing is that as we speak, more rockets are being launched towards Israel. Can you confirm that for us?
Yes, and I need to add a few more pieces of information. There are tens of thousands of Israelis that evacuated from their homes in the south and in the north over here in Israel. So this is not happening just in Gaza. And the atmosphere here in Israel is that, there is routine, but there is no routine. I send my kids, I live up north, I send my kids away. They are not here. Everybody's drafted. It means that many businesses are closed, economic activity doesn't exist. And another thing that it's important to mention, you mentioned the death numbers in Gaza of civilians that were killed. First, we don't know out of these numbers how many are civilians and how many are Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorists. Usually when the Gazians are counting the dead, they mix them both. And second, they were not killed by the strikes of the IDF. They were killed by the fact that these terrorist organizations are putting them at risk as human shields to protect their ammunition, missiles, and other military capability. And the one who should be held accountable for their death is the terrorist group, not the IDF.
I understand what you're saying. Now, Sarit, Hamas has said that it has over 100 Israelis who are being held hostage in Gaza. The number is anywhere between 100 and 150. Many of them are women, children, elderly people, even high ranking army officers, they claim. And they have threatened to begin executing these hostages if the bombings continue in Gaza. And they say they're going to televise these executions. Israel has said that the strikes will continue regardless of that threat. Is there a real concern that these hostages are in real danger as these counter strikes continue and could end up becoming collateral damage?
I believe that Hamas will try to do that. Yet I must say that when we are counting 900 dead and the barrier between Israel and Gaza is only protected by soldiers, the physical barrier is, I don't want to say collapsed, but it's not effective. And IDF needs to protect Israeli citizens. We are under fire since Saturday morning. These are, as you said, thousands of rockets were launched to Israel, and Israelis are getting killed by these rockets. And the only way to protect millions of Israelis is to fight Hamas. As I've said, Hamas is using innocent civilians as human shields, not only Gazians. Now it has 100 Israelis as well. It's a problem. I believe that the government is dealing with this dilemma and question as we speak, trying to understand where are they exactly. But on the other hand, the government's mission is to protect millions of Israelis.
I understand this is a very difficult situation for Israel. Your country has been through unprecedented and absolutely horrific attacks. Obviously, shocked not just and shaken not just Israel, but the whole world. Talking about the hostages, Sarit, there are reports that Qatar may be negotiating the release of the Israeli hostages in exchange for the freedom of Palestinian prisoners. Is that something that, according to you, Israel would be willing to consider a hostage prisoner swap?
This is something that I cannot relate to. If I will say anything around that to either side, I'm damaging the negotiations. I don't want to talk about it.
I understand and I respect that. I just want to talk a little bit about what a lot of people are saying today. Even as there's a lot of outrage and a sense of horror, I can tell you, in India and across the world over what's happened in Israel, the butchery, the massacre that's happened on an unprecedented scale. Concerns are also being expressed over the Israeli imposition of a complete siege on Gaza. It is a densely populated enclave, as we know. It's home to 2.3 million people. 50% of them are said to be children. Now, Israeli Defense Minister has said a complete siege would mean no food, no water, no electricity, no fuel. There are some who are asking the question, should more than 2 million people of Gaza be starved to death or bombed uh, to punish Hamas for its crimes? What would you say to that?
I have so many things to say. First, they're not going to starve to death because there is enough food in Gaza, and you can see the markets and the culture. The Middle Eastern culture is that you have food at your home that can provide you, without starving or anything for at least 2 weeks and maybe even more. That's something about culture. Second, Israel is not the only one who borders Gaza. Okay, there is Egypt as well. So we have our interest that you can probably understand after everything that happened. And maybe this question should be asked the Egyptians as well. And third is everybody were saying throughout the years that there is siege on Gaza. Nobody waited for this catastrophe to happen. In the international community, we were blamed that we put siege on Gaza. So here is my question. If there was siege on Gaza, how come there is so much ammunition in Gaza? Where the missile came from? And if the missiles were smuggled to Gaza, couldn't food be smuggled to Gaza? Who takes care of these Gazans? I should take care of them? I have enough problems.
That is a legitimate question. Where did so much ammunition come from? I think that is a question that is really right now boggling the minds of people around the world. Um, One more question on this, Sarit, before we move on. UNICEF has called for a humanitarian corridor in and out of Gaza. Um, is that an option that you think Israel might be willing to consider? Of course, so far Israel has said that the airstrikes will continue relentlessly.
I truly don't know, but I ask the same question. Egyptians are willing to open this corridor for UNICEF? There was no massacre in Egypt.
Okay. You're saying why put this question just to Israel, which has suffered the most horrific terror attacks in its history? Okay, so let me now
Look
move
at
on.
the maps. Look at the maps. There are border crossings that are closed for years between Gaza and Egypt. We are not now the player that should discuss humanitarian assistance to Gaza. We are up to our heads dealing with collecting food, clothing, psychological support, shelters for communities, not people, full communities that don't exist anymore after Hamas burned them. People are living in hotels, in shelters, in buildings outside of their homes, not for 1 or 2 days. It's gonna take weeks. We need to take care of humanitarian aid for them. If international community wants to take care of humanitarian aid for the Gazans, which I highly appreciate the efforts, you should speak with the Egyptians. They are the player that you should discuss it with, because we are busy in taking care of the tens of thousands of Israelis that don't live in their homes. We are taking care of 900 funerals, of identifying 900 bodies. Humanitarian problems should be, and it's important to do that. Do that with Egypt, and I'll give you another, small, how can I put it? Small request, maybe, as an Israeli. I'll put it this way. Make sure, please, that any humanitarian aid that you are providing to Gaza is going to civilians. Don't trust any promises. Just make sure that it's not going to terror, that it's not going to feed the terrorists, because as I've told you, Hamas and Islamic Jihad do not distinguish. When they tell you the narrative, they don't distinguish between the terrorists and the civilians. They count the deads together, the wounded together, and they provide the food and the medical assistance first to their own terrorists and maybe later to the civilians.
All right. Sarit, if I may ask you, certain questions which I know will be tough for you or any Israeli to answer at this point in time, but these are questions that are being asked around the globe. So I would be remiss in my duty as a journalist if I did not put these questions to you, because you are a security expert. Now, of course, many Israelis have said that these attacks are their 9/11, which is completely understandable. But we had one security expert from Israel on our show yesterday, Hilit Barel, former director of Israeli National Security Council, and she said something interesting to me. She said, no, this is far worse than 9/11, because the United States was caught off guard. But Israel actually had been preparing for exactly this for years, because we knew that we were facing an enemy like the Hamas. It should not have been caught by surprise. And the scale of the intelligence failure that has happened here, unfortunately, she agreed, is mind boggling. What are your thoughts on that?
Two things. First, I thought you would say that it's worse than 9/11, because if you compare the numbers, this is 900 people killed in a country of 9 million people. It means that everybody here knows somebody, most of us more than one, who was killed, involved, wounded in this massacre. Second, it's worse than 9/11 because it's not one place in one town out of many. This is an area of tens of communities that don't exist anymore, that basically the people cannot go back to their homes. Okay? This is completely different. In Israel, we started that and we said this is Yom Kippur, meaning the war in 1973, that we were surprised. In a minute, I'll talk about intelligence. But I would say this is not only Yom Kippur, it's 47. You know what 47 is? It's the independent war. It's war everywhere in Israel. It's the feeling that we are under a threat that I don't know how to explain that. A threat, it's not existential threat, but it's a threat that if we will not deal with, it will become existential threat. Okay, because eventually it's a direct threat on the people's life. It's not an army that is coming to occupy, it's an army that came to kill. First and foremost, not an army, a terrorist army that came to kill. Now to your question about intelligence. I think that people like myself and Hilit, we are civilians. We don't know what kind of information was in the hands of intelligence community in Israel. I'm an ex-intelligence officer. And I can tell you that, yes, we knew that we are bordering radicals, extreme radical ideology. Moreover, we knew that Iran is planning an attack by its proxies in the region, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, from Lebanon, Hezbollah, Syria, Yemen, Iraq, West Bank, and inside Israel. This was the Iranian plan. I don't know, I don't have all the answers, why all of it was not executed yet, but it is clear to me that this is what they were trying to do now. The question is, so we knew there is a plan. All of us knew there is a plan. It was not a secret. It's not classified information, what we just said. The big question is about timing. I can make an analysis and understand why this timing was chosen. But I don't know what kind of information, clear information about the specific date and the specific time was in the hands of intelligence. And in any case, what I can say is that all these questions should be dealt and will be dealt once the fighting is over. Israelis now are busy, as I've said, in dealing with the catastrophe that we are facing, and moreover, dealing with being prepared to the next catastrophe, and I hope it will not be a catastrophe, from up north, because you bear in mind that Hezbollah in Lebanon holds 10 times more amounts of rockets than Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza. 10 times more. People are getting killed by the rockets now in Israel, in various places in Israel. Iron Dome is very effective. We don't know the exact percentage of interception, but it's very effective. But the amount of rockets that Hezbollah is holding will challenge us in a different way. And we are all aware of that, and preparations are being made here. I live up north, 12 kilometers from the Israeli-Lebanese border, and I can say that we are prepared. The army is on the border. We see tanks, armored, infantry, logistics all the time. I see them on the roads going up to the border. We understand that the Israeli army is prepared, and it is not going to be surprised up north. But even though we are not going to be surprised, the capabilities of Hezbollah, which are spread throughout the Lebanese towns and communities, not only in South Lebanon, will launch rockets at us. And this is something that, even though the IDF is fully prepared, it will take time until we will be able to prevent it completely.
You're quite right, but can I ask you this? You're talking about how the international community puts pressure on Israel and is likely to do that this time around as well, saying, wrap up your operations. But, France, Germany, Italy, the US, and the UK held talks on this issue just today. They've issued a very strong statement condemning Hamas for the terror attacks and have expressed unstinting support for Israel. As we know, the US is sending naval warships and military aircraft and ammunition. Some of these countries have also suspended aid to Palestine. So, what do you feel about the global response so far to these terror attacks on Israel? And what are your expectations from the international community at this point?
First, I highly appreciate that. I am grateful for this assistance and for this support. We've seen solidarity with the state of Israel all over Europe and across the world, in India as well. And this is very encouraging for us in this tough time. But at the same time, you see what is happening in Gaza. And usually, like in previous conflicts, at first there is solidarity with Israel. And when Israel is trying to fight this radical ideology to defend its citizens, we are being stopped by the international community. I experienced that personally a few times when I was in the army. And I think that after this catastrophe, the whole world should understand that it's not just my business. Because radical ideology, today they endanger Israelis, and tomorrow it's 9/11, and the next day it's in India, and the next week it's in Europe or Australia. We cannot allow that anymore, especially when behind this radical ideology there is a state. It's not a terrorist organization that cares about the Palestinian narrative. There is a state that distributes terror, and the regime is the Iranian regime. By the way, the people of Iran know best how dangerous this regime is, better than you and me. We must unite to remove these threats. And I'm very happy that in Europe and the United States, they begin to understand what I've just said. They begin to understand that it's not just Israel's business. This is something global. It should be dealt, with all measures that are optional or possible.
Sarit, I'm just playing the devil's advocate, so I need to ask you a couple of more questions before we let you go. What would you say to those who argue that the Israeli government's resettlement efforts in the West Bank aggravated the situation in the region?
What's the correction? I don't see that. We unilaterally withdrawn from Gaza in 2005. The Hamas treaty talks about the destruction of the state of Israel, and that the only legitimate campaign is the armed campaign. I'm trying to translate from Arabic. The armed campaign, and the armed struggle. What's that got to do with the fact that Jews are living in West Bank? My grandmother was born in the West Bank. What's the problem that Jews would live in West Bank? I don't understand. Arabs live in Israel. Why can't Jews live in West Bank?
Okay. They see it as a provocation. You're saying Jews have every right to live in West Bank, and I absolutely am not going to comment on that at all. I understand, the
I don't
sense.
live in West Bank. My grandmother was born in West Bank, and she was 7 years old when there was a massacre in her town against Arabs, against Jews, and she was expelled from her town named Hebron, which is one of the holiest cities for Jews. And she was expelled for them. This was 1929. This is my personal story of my grandmother. Am I a Palestinian? I don't know, but this is my personal story. So truly, if we want to live in peace, why can't we live together?
Well, yes, the trouble with terrorists is they don't like peace. They don't understand the language of peace. And you're quite right that, Hamas doesn't even care about their own people. They heartlessly use the Palestinian people, including little children, as human shields. That is the problem here. Can I also ask you this, Sarah? There are many who are saying that, the US was negotiating some sort of a peace agreement between Saudi Arabia and Israel. It was on the right track, relations were improving. Iran, which you clearly blame for orchestrating these attacks, many believe did not want this peace deal to go through, and to derail it, to sabotage it, they orchestrated these attacks. Do you see that as a plausible factor?
Yes, and in the statement of Hezbollah that was issued on Sunday, they said very clearly, we send the message to those who wanted to normalize the relationship with Israel, beware, see what could be done. I don't remember the exact phrase, but I can send it to you. But the issue of normalization is definitely present when we speak about the timing of this attack. So there is a combination of three things here. First is as I've said, the basic ideology and the basic vision of Iran to destroy the state of Israel by creating multi-front campaign against the state of Israel. Second is the fact that Iran, in the past decade, succeeded in establishing its military presence in countries in the Middle East by proxies: Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Gaza, and maybe even West Bank. We can discuss this. Okay, and third, the very specific timing, as you said, normalization with Saudi Arabia, which Iran viewed this as a huge risk, and this was that timing to execute the plan to try to stop that. All of this together, I think, created it's not the reason, it's the timing, created the time.
Final question, Sarit, before I let you go. I think a lot of people around the world can't even imagine what the people of Israel have been through since Saturday. This is an impossibly difficult time for the country, and we all know it's far from over. It's still unfolding. Israel is at war. Um, but if I may ask you, what is it like to be an Israeli at this point in time?
It's the saddest situation. I'm a mother of 3 children. I'm remarried, so my husband has 2 more. And I sent my kids away to say I said goodbye to them because I don't want them to be here up north next to the Lebanese border. All my husband's nephews are recruited, are drafted in the army. and his daughter. What can I say? We know we live, it's our DNA, under the understanding that the state of Israel must exist, not only because it's our homeland for 3,000 years, but also because it's the only insurance for the Jewish people. And we are not going to give up, because if we give up, we lose this insurance. We don't have any other option. Before all of that happened, even my son, he told me, you know what? Life is too expensive here. Maybe I should go and live in Europe. I told him, 6 million Jews, ashes. You go to Poland, you see the amount of ashes of 6 million Jews that thought like you. We are the insurance of the Jews around the world, of the existence of Jews around the world. The strength, the state of Israel is the insurance. And everybody knows. Everybody knows. Iran knows. So we have to prevail, and we shall prevail.
I completely understand that sentiment. Like I said, as a country that has been a victim of many terror attacks in the past, we Indians do understand a lot of the pain that Israelis are currently going through. And I can tell you, Sarit, our hearts go out to the victims and their families. We know a lot of families have been wiped out in this tragedy. For them, life will never be the same again. And I can also tell you that our thoughts and prayers right now are with the people of Israel, and we're all hoping that this gets over very, very soon. On that note, Lieutenant Colonel Sarit Zehavi, thank you so much for taking the time and patiently answering my questions at a difficult time for yourself and for your country.
Thank you for having me.